I wanted to ask you about the adjustment to abnormality, and I think you hinted at that earlier. We, for the most part, not all of us, for the most part, sort of navigate this terrain by getting generator subscriptions that we kind of just, if you're in Beirut, usually it's 3 hours a day, if not longer, like last Monday. And we kind of navigate that. You pay a premium on it, and you live and you adjust accordingly. And if it's a city like Tripoli, for example, perhaps 12 hours a day, people pay a lot in generator subscriptions. And I'm pointing in on this issue because I'm curious about the hindrances that prevent the average person from demanding more, at least earlier. Because it's almost like any issue that needs reform, and when it comes to the Lebanese state, the citizens are quick to adapt because they don't think there's going to be anything fixed in the short, medium, or even long term. But is that psychological component part of the story that we've learned to navigate without depending on government electricity?
It's a double-edged sword, no?
Yeah, exactly.
In a way, the Lebanese people have become so numb about anything. So
right.
When you're actually demanding any kind of basic rights, the electricity is a basic right. When the electricity utility is state-owned, it's supposed to be provided by the government. It's the least you can do. So as Lebanese people, we've become so numb and we don't trust the government that we hear that a lot. It's just Lebanon. This is the way Lebanon is.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it has provided this kind of, for Lebanese to kind of do well anywhere they go because they adapt well and
right.
They provide alternatives to everything. On the other side, you're supposed to actually demand accountability and basic rights and services. So we don't do that because we just kind of numb on all of this stuff.
Right.
But when we look into the power sector, so in the past, the Lebanese have actually been a lot, on the majority at least, because not everyone does have a generator, and that's very important
sure.
to mention.
Yes.
We do not have equity of and justice in the service provision. So as you mentioned, the farther you are from the capital, the longer the electricity shortage you face, and
right.
you're paying a high bill for the generators. And a lot of people, especially in rural areas, do not have a generator subscription. It impacts businesses, the ability to actually start a business or run it. It impacts the entire economy, productive activities. It impacts competitiveness because when you're, as a business, you're paying a high bill for the generator, especially your competitiveness on the regional and international level is low. So it results in more trade imbalance and all these
right.
factors. But moving forward, so now we have this crisis is also, so we have an economic crisis, a political crisis, a social crisis, but we also have a lack of shortage of foreign reserves.
Right.
So you need dollars to actually import fuel, whether it's for generators or for the electricity utility. And as this would run out and would decrease, and you'll have shortage of electricity, not only on the electricity utility side, but also on the generator side. So these are going to actually, so you're going to actually have, if this, and I'm just speaking in a way, if the government keeps this business as usual scenario and they keep acting the way they are now, so we're heading to a longer shortage of electricity and actual blackout where the citizen doesn't have neither generator or electricity utility. And this is why I mentioned the future protests. That's actually a very destabilizing factor.
So it's in a way, in the short term, there's a good chance that things will get worse, at least in this sector. I'm sorry to even. That's a very that's a very bleak assessment with a smile, which is why I want to get deeper into this. I share the sentiment with you, but is it that because the state is so incapable of reforming and handling crises that you see it perhaps getting worse?
So I find it illogical to assume that the same people who got you in the crisis first are going to be able to pull you out of it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So you need, if there was any leadership on the state level in any sector, we wouldn't get to this. So reforms normally have required a champion everywhere in the world.
Yes.
And it has never happened that the champion has been there for 10, 20 or 30 years and then they wake up one day and they champion anything. So it has to be a new leader with actual leader skills, because we have political parties. I call them da'im. I shy away from using the term actual leader. because we have a very crisis of leadership in Lebanon.
I'm glad so you've said a few things that I'll try to link and I'll gauge your mind. I like that you've pointed out at almost that there's an immediacy to the problem. And I've had several conversations the last few weeks where the time issue is so important that you can't simply wait too long for things to improve. So there's that time factor. But there's also another issue which you're describing, that for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, it's familiar faces, it's familiar ideas, it's familiar ways of governing, and it's 3 decades or even older. So it's something that both of us have grown up with in Lebanon. And these two things are kind of reaching a crossroads. And then in the background, you have citizen demands that are not being met. And then, of course, you have all these other bigger problems that you've described. And then there's a shortage of fuel. And I hope I got this right, that the electricity sector on its own, it's about $2 billion a year in terms of expenses. So, I mean, that's... I guess what I'm asking is, can we wait for the protesters to yield structural change, or are we forced at the moment to pressure the current regime into doing its basic job? And I guess I'm looking at it as, can we wait a few years? Because I assume this will take years. It's not something that will happen anytime soon. Or do we have that luxury, or are we forced to point the finger at what's available and say, we need to hold you to account?
So I think it's not either or. It just have to run simultaneously, because yes, it does take several years to have new faces or a better performing system.
Yeah.
And it's like whatever it is, but you need to act in different phases and on different levels. So if we go back to the smaller sectorial level of the power sector, we need to fix first the governance structure, and that can't wait. And you need to provide electricity, but we need to do it with the most sustainable path to a long-term actual sustainable plan.
Right.
So now the power sector has been ad hoc. We're going to implement this, get to power barges, and the government has always used that sense of urgency to actually compromise sustainability and building something that's sustainable and least cost. So we've seen it's urgent now, we have to get electricity because otherwise it's doomsday. And then I've personally been hearing that for the past 20 or 10 years. So it was urgent, when the first official policy paper in 2010, it was very urgent. So we got the power barges and we didn't implement any permanent power plants. So if I'm just going to tell you this, and it's I'm so ashamed of saying it publicly, but last time Lebanon has built a power plant was in 1999.
Right, and that's not even a very big power plant. Right.
Yeah, and these things have been in the works since 1882. So it's not rocket science.